And all right, so we're live. I'm gonna do a couple prompts, and then we'll get everyone going, and we'll get our conversation started in a couple minutes. So if you all are just tuning into this after the fact, skip ahead a couple minutes. It's where we really get started. I have here on the phone today Ken Ramirez. Super excited to talk about. I'm not sure where we're gonna go. We're just gonna start with what your story is, right? And see where that kind of takes us. So it is rolling. Joan should be able to now see it. Excuse me. I'm going to invite who I can. Let's see. Doug, Travis, Dia. How's your day going so far, Ken?
It's going well, thank you.
Cool.
Busy day as always, but it's good.
Where are you located today?
Well, today I'm in our offices in Boston area.
Okay. Do you travel a lot?
I do. I travel quite a bit. I'm on the road frequently with a lot of the projects I'm involved with.
Very cool. I'm excited to jump into some of those today. Let's see. Here we go. Got some more people invited. Let's see how we're doing on the views. Okay. Excuse me. Still getting over this cold. I think we still have another minute or so until Joan's got them shared across all the other platforms. So if again you're still tuning in, skip just a little bit ahead, and that's where you will find the real conversation starting. Let's see here. All right. Welcome. Do me a favor if you're just getting in here, write in so I can see. Normally I have like a dashboard, but I can't see who's in here right now. So say hello, where you're from, and we will get started. Okay, people are starting to trickle in. Here we go. So Ken's not on Facebook, so there's a few different ways we were trying to get this rolling. The easiest way in kind of the mix of what we got going on, because I'm on the road, was to get him streamed in through mobile and us just kind of chatting in this way. Very low tech, high tech coming together. So Ken's going to be looking at the wall, and I was like, do the best you can with what we got. So hey sis, hey Lena. So Ken, I will talk about this in a couple of. I'll kind of go with the flow in two ways. We're going to go through just kind of a semi-structured chit chat conversation, but we're also going to. I'll bring in some of the comments, questions that people have as we kind of get going. So it's kind of this ebb and flow, some conversations, some chit chat. Okay. So
sounds good. You
said you're in Boston, you're hanging out there, you have an office there. What is that office? Let's maybe start there. Like, what are you doing in Boston right now?
Well, I am the Executive Vice President and Chief Training Officer for Care & Fire Clicker Training. So our offices are here in Boston, and although I don't live here in Boston, I do most of my work all over the world. I do try to spend a week out of every couple of months here in the Boston area because this is where some of our staff are located. So it's a good opportunity for me to check in with staff. Part of my responsibilities with Care & Fire Clicker Training is to oversee the vision and mission of the Care & Fire Academy, which is a certification arm for certified professional dog trainers. I also oversee the programming and educational content for our Clicker Expos, which is this excellent positive reinforcement conference that we do twice a year in the U.S. and once a year in Europe. And I also am running a part of the Care & Fire National Training Center, which is located in Washington State, and we call that the Ranch.
Yeah.
And from there, I teach a lot of courses and do a lot of programming from there as well. And then separate from all of that, I also consult with a variety of different programs and help people implement positive reinforcement into their everyday lives, into their programs, into their zoo or into their dog training program in one way or another. So I am constantly involved in projects all over the place.
Nice.
I travel quite a bit, do a lot of stuff overseas, and do a lot of things here in the U.S. as well.
That's exciting. So if anyone has questions specifically about any of that, including the animal training components, start getting them queued up and in the comments. We'll ask those in just a little bit. Now, all right, Ken, how did you get started in this line of work? Can you rewind back a little bit?
Oh, sure. That's not hard to do. I grew up on a ranch in southern New Mexico, and so I've been around horses and cattle and chickens my whole life. I don't know that I really thought about working with animals as a career until I got into high school.
Yeah.
And when I was in high school, I happened to have an opportunity to volunteer at the Institute for the Blind, where they train guide dogs for the visually impaired. And that was my first exposure to formal training. And I think when I started seeing people train these dogs for blind people, I suddenly thought to myself, wow, what a cool job. You play with dogs all day long, but you train them for this really good, noble purpose.
Yeah.
That's what I think I want to do.
Nice.
And so I got exposed to guide dog training, as I said, at a very young age. It was when I was 15, 16, and 17 years old. And when I went to college, I sort of focused my studies on animal behavior, thinking that I would eventually become a guide dog trainer. But while I was attending college, I was at the University of Houston. I happened to have heard about an opening for an education specialist at a marine life park on Galveston Island.
Okay.
And I went down and looked into that as a summer job, and I ended up getting a job in the education department where I helped teach classes and narrate presentations about reptiles, about marine mammals, about birds. And as I worked around the professional trainers, I realized that a lot of what I had been fascinated by about guide dog training was exactly what they were doing in working with the animals there in that marine life park. And I ended up getting an entry-level position there as a trainer with dolphins and sea lions. And that sort of made me realize that all learning was the same, whether you were talking about teaching a dog to be a guide dog, or teaching a sea lion to help with his own care, or even teaching people. The more I've worked around this kind of thing, I've begun to learn that there is such a connection between training of any kind of animal. And so that's sort of how I started down that path of working with quite a variety of different species.
Very cool. That's a ton of different animal species to be working with. That's so cool.
I think someone did an assessment or a calculation of the number of animals that I've worked with in my career, and the total number of individuals is in the thousands. But when it comes to species, I've probably worked with several hundred different species of animals as a trainer.
That is so cool. I assume you don't have a favorite, but like, is there certain like challenges and certain, like, is there any that have kind of stood out for you?
Oh, well, sure. I mean, I've worked with a lot of different animals over the years, so I think that for me, I find that each different animal creates or presents different kinds of challenges, because although the laws of learning are the same, I always tell my students, I used to teach a graduate course on animal training at Western Illinois University.
Okay.
And I would always tell them that whether you're training an earthworm or a Harvard graduate, we all learn the same way. And while there's truth to that, there is also the truth that each species is different, and the way you approach training is going to be a little bit different. So I think that I find different challenges with different kinds of animals. The thing that makes pet training so exciting and so challenging is the fact that those animals live in our homes with us.
Okay.
So we're dealing with their behavior 24 hours a day, and that presents a far different challenge than, let's say, working with an animal that may live in an outdoor environment and that may live in a zoological environment. Also, when you're working with working dogs, like I do a lot of work with Homeland Security and scent detection work, or with guide dog organizations, with guide dogs or search and rescue organizations, there's a much different type of challenge, because you're working with animals that are working in a very unique, highly distracting environment that they have a task to do and a job to do, and they have to stay focused. And then in the last 20 years, I've been doing a lot of different types of conservation work. And in conservation work, I work with animals in the wild, chimpanzees, elephants, a variety of animals where we have to find ways of shaping and adapting and changing their behavior but they can't know that we're doing it. They are still being themselves out in nature, but yet we're shaping their behavior to help protect them because they are at risk of being threatened or their conservation status is threatened. And so that kind of work is far different. And so for me, it's not about a favorite animal, but it's about using my knowledge about animal behavior and finding ways to adapt it and use it in new ways that challenges my skills and that hopefully is going to help those variety of species in the various projects that we're working on.
Okay, yeah, I like that. So are there some things that you find yourself kind of teaching a lot in these workshops and such? Like is it certain principles like shaping or procedures?
Well, sure.
Or
I mean, I have many different workshops. And so, for example, on our ranch, where we have 3 one-week immersive courses, one course is called Training for Professionals, and that is a course that really takes people through all of the basic skills necessary to have a professional training program. It takes you through all the different ways of getting behavior, all the way through things like problem solving, dealing with aggression, and how to apply these techniques in practical ways in real world virtual programs. So that Training for Professionals course is designed for everybody from the pet dog trainer who wants to take clients in their homes and help them be better trainers for their pets, to zookeepers, to animals who work, to people who work with animals in all kinds of settings. And that particular course is a comprehensive, full course on how to put together a complete training program and be the best trainer you can be.
Okay.
Then I have another one-week course that's called Deep Dive, and that Deep Dive course goes into more esoteric topics, and it helps people with things like non-food reinforcers or research training or working with dogs in a real-world environment or conservation training, or it talks about things like dealing with complex aggression, or it talks about a variety of those harder topics that an experienced trainer may need to deal with now that they have been training professionally for a long time.
Yeah.
And so I really work in a wide spectrum of arenas, and so my courses are designed to help trainers at all levels of skill with all sorts of different backgrounds to be able to apply the science of training in their practical settings.
Very cool. So is there any teaser as to what you might be talking about when we get to Seattle?
Well, for the Seattle conference, I really am going to focus on the theme of the conference, which is really the convergence of people training, animal training, and technology. And there are a number of projects that I work on that really embodies all of those things. I have been working on, like I said, conservation projects, and many of the conservation projects require using what we call remote training. Remote training is a kind of training where I may be sitting in a jeep in the wilds of Africa watching a webcam of elephants moving across the savannah, and I will make training decisions from that location that will help adjust the behavior of those particular animals. But for that to happen, it requires that I use not only my animal training skills, but that I also use the technology of the camera, the technology of remote feeding devices, and I have to use a team of over 250 park rangers and volunteers that are going to help with that training. And a lot of teaching them is about using people teaching skills to help them learn a task and a skill that isn't their normal line of work.
Yeah.
And so it's a really good example of taking the art and science of animal training, the skill of people teaching, and the technology, and putting them all in one particular project. So I'll probably share a couple of those kinds of projects, as well as the fact that one of the things that I've been working a lot with in the last several years has been examining the cognitive abilities of dogs.
Okay.
And oftentimes when looking at the cognitive abilities of dogs, there are all sorts of technological tools that we use to make that training work. And in trying to replicate those projects to really understand what dogs are capable of doing, there is once again the need to teach other people how to do that. And so that is yet another example of using animal skills, people teaching skills and technology and putting them all into one place. So at the Seattle conference, I really took the theme, the title of that conference quite seriously, and I'm going to really highlight 2 or 3 of the different kinds of projects that I'm involved in that sort of utilize all of those skills. And I'll talk about how that happens, why that happens, what the challenges are,
okay,
but the exciting future that I think putting all of those together holds for us.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. One nerdy question real quick. Were you looking, I feel like I've heard that you or someone was in a situation where they were looking at dogs relating skills and like the complex kind of languaging skills. Was that you that was looking at those sort of things, like the procedures?
Well, not that particular project. Certainly the kind of work that I am doing is about dogs' cognitive abilities to relate different ideas and
okay,
new thoughts and new concepts. I'm looking at things like the ability for dogs to recognize quantities or do what we as humans might call counting. That's a really good example of that I will probably talk a little bit about at the conference, because it's one of those things that it was thought that dogs couldn't really do, but the reality is we're discovering that they can. Part of it was figuring out how to teach them that idea and then how to test it, and it required some technology to make that happen. There's also the idea of animals being able to do what's called deduction, which is what you're talking about, where after teaching several separate concepts, putting those concepts together to create brand new concepts is something that was often thought of as, sometimes referred to as Aristotelian logic, coming from Aristotle.
Okay.
It was once thought that humans were the only creatures that could use that kind of knowledge, and we're slowly beginning to see that there's quite a few animals that can do that as well.
Yeah, that's something that I heard through Joe Lang, actually. You were working on the counting procedure specifically. I know it's something he's talked about. He'll also be at the event. You guys have worked extensively on a few different projects together, right?
Well, we both have taught at similar conferences, and as such, I really tapped Joe Lang's great mind for ideas and thoughts that would help me make some of my projects better. So while we haven't worked together on specific projects, we've certainly worked or been at places where we've had the ability to share ideas with each other that have hopefully helped each other's projects.
Yeah, very cool. So I'm super excited. It sounds like you're really blending those 3 areas like perfectly together. That's going to be awesome to experience. A lot of the Seattle event was creating opportunity for people to come together and learn about these sort of things and how they intersect. And I talked to you briefly last night about how I feel like that's not always in the training programs and such. So anyone who is looking for, that's eager to learn or understand like how these things all kind of integrate, especially the animal side, like I'm really excited to see, and I think this is a good example presentation of like how we'll be doing that. So thank you for that. I'm looking
forward to it as well.
Yeah, there's a question from Joan. She said, what's more challenging, training animals or teaching people? And I will add in, or handling the technology.
Well, that's an interesting question, and I think it was, to quote Bob Bailey, who when he teaches people about training animals, one of the things that he always says is the animals are the easy part. And the reality is that because the laws of learning are so clear, and sometimes because we do not have the ability to directly communicate with animals like we do with people, it actually makes the training of animals a little bit easier. I think when we start dealing with people, we layer in our emotional connection to those people. We try to read in between the lines of what people say. And so consequently, for a lot of people, teaching people is hard. And but it's ultimately, when you're an animal trainer, your job is all about working with people. You're teaching your clients how to train their dogs. You're working with people in a setting where working with the people is really important as well. And so once you know how to work with people, it isn't necessarily that difficult, but it requires a separate focus. You can't just do the animal training. You have to also focus on the people part of the equation. And it's equally important. And then to add your part to the question, the technology, I think for me, because I grew up in an era where we weren't using smartphones and we weren't using computers, and we didn't have all that technology. A lot of that technology doesn't come easy to me, because I learned it later in life, but I certainly have loved embracing it. And I think many of the new projects that I've been involved in wouldn't be possible if it wasn't for the technology. And the good news is there's a lot of really good people out there that are experts in technology. So I rely on them to say, here's what I'd like to accomplish.
Yeah.
And help show me how to get that done. And that's a wonderful thing about a lot of the projects I work with are really team-based projects that require a lot of expertise from a variety of different disciplines and bringing them all together to be able to create a successful project.
Very cool. Yeah, I was at a business event called the National Achievers Congress, I think. And there were some folks talking about technology there, and the words, I think you said embrace, like embracing technology, like it's here, right. It's something that like we can use, and we need to figure out how to use that to our advantage.
Absolutely.
And it's scary if you're not really into it, but I think embracing is a perfect example there. Like find someone who can leverage it and use it then to help out, you know? How do you build a team that can leverage that technology?
And what's really nice is the technology has progressed to a point now where it is pretty accessible to everybody. It wasn't, you don't have to be rich. You don't have to be able to afford expensive equipment to be able to use technology to train your dog at home or to work on a variety of different projects. And so that's the exciting thing about technology today. It's become quite affordable and quite accessible to all of us.
I would totally agree. Yeah, it's insane. I've recently got into video work and just videography, and I remember thinking like, oh, the cameras are so expensive, but it's just been a slow progression of using what was ever disposable and at my fingertips. And yes, I've got like a whole lot more gear now and accessibility to those sort of things, but it's still relatively inexpensive compared to what it used to be. And it's awesome at what you can do there. So cool. I'm gonna check in really quick on the comments. We've had a continual 10 or 15 people kind of watching, coming in and out. Vicky Tucci popped in. She's gonna be presenting there. Hey, Vicky. Stefan over in, where are you at? You're in Sweden, right, Stefan? Not sure if there's Suri. Suri dropped in and said, hey, how you doing? Excited for, what'd you say? Nice to see Ken's interview. Good job. Thank you. Not sure if there's specific questions. Here we go. Beverly wrote in something. So I'm going to switch you over to me so you can see me for a second. This is looking good so far on the way we got this set up too. So she said, following this, what would you suggest the single most important tool trainers can embrace to help with their people communication skills? For example, would you develop scripts such as are used in sales, especially when a cognitive dissonance is present? So do you have anything for that?
Well, I don't know about specific tools. I mean, I certainly teach a lot about how to work with people, and a lot of it is about having honest and open communication. Certainly having a script for how to say something when you're talking about a difficult topic, that can be helpful, you know, and when you're trying to teach somebody something that's technical, having some talking points and having that well thought out is really, really important. But a lot about being able to work with people is just developing good people skills. And it's about being sincere. It's about really listening. It's about having two-way communication. And when there's controversy, when there's conflict, it's about finding ways to keep the door open.
Yeah.
Too often when we get into conflict, we just, I don't want to talk about it anymore. We basically shut off all conversation. And as soon as we shut off conversation, no more progress can happen. Nothing more can develop. And so, for me, a lot of the conservation projects that I'm involved with deal with government agencies, deal with wildlife biologists, deal with environmental activist groups, deal with people with very, very diverse opinions. We all have an interest in doing what's right for the animals, but we have different opinions about the right way to go about doing that. And often what happens is because of those diverse opinions, it is so easy to see a project just shut down because people don't want to talk to each other. When the reality is, if we really want to do good work for the animals, if we want to do good work for our society, if you want to do good work for your company, it's about being able to talk to the people and keep that dialogue open. And so there are a lot of techniques, and when you say tools, I don't know so much that there are what people would normally think of as tools, but certainly there are strategies and there are methods that you can use to help keep the door open and keep the conversation going and help have a connection with people so that you can relate to them. I think it's a sad thing that often when I talk to young people who want to become veterinarians or want to become animal trainers, and I'll say, what made you decide you wanted to be an animal trainer or wanted to be a vet? And they'll often say, well, it's because I love animals and hate people. And I always have to stop them right there and say, whoa, you got to change that. Because most of our jobs, although you're working with animals, you are working with people as well. And unless you become good at working with people, unless you figure out how to talk to people, you're going to fail as a veterinarian.
Yeah.
You're going to fail as an animal trainer because your clients are people. And it's an important thing to recognize is how to work with people. And so it's conversation tools, it's negotiating tools, those are the kinds of things that I would tell people that are important as far as tools go. It's these procedures and strategies for working with people that are important.
I dig that. I feel like it's something that I've come to value and I agree with more and more. And it's also just been, for me, getting more practice opportunities in those situations, right?
Right.
Like anything else, it's reps. It's getting practice and feedback in those situations that really matter.
Absolutely.
Joan said that you're the master at this, keeping the conversation going with controversial topics.
Well, I don't know if I appreciate that, Joe. Thank you. I certainly have had to deal with it throughout my career. As someone who's dealt in a lot of very controversial areas where there are a lot of strong opinions, such as the conservation work that I'm talking about, there are people that are often in diametrically opposing positions on how a process should proceed. And it can be heated, it can be difficult, and it does require some patience and a willingness to listen to all sides of the argument if you want to really make progress. And for me, I'm so committed to making some of these conservation projects work, or often even when I work within the dog training world today, I work really hard to try to bring positive reinforcement training into some areas where traditional approaches and punishment approaches have been more common. Coming into those areas, it's a very delicate balance of working with these people who have ways of training that have been used in their profession for decades, if not centuries, and you're trying to help convince them that they should look at some other options.
Yeah.
And being able to help people make that transition is not about coming in with a bulldozer and trying to tell them that everything they've done is wrong and they've got to throw everything out the window. It's coming in with a common ground approach to figure out what do we share that we agree with and how can we help move your program in another direction that will make you successful and set you up to be happy with your results. And so like you were saying, Ryan, it's about repetition. And because I've worked in those kinds of tough, controversial, difficult situations often, I don't love going into them. I don't like controversy any more than anybody else does.
Yeah.
But I've learned not to run away from it, and I've learned how to go into it with an open mind that can hopefully get all of us to a place that we're happy with and do something that's going to make the project successful.
Awesome. Yeah, I like that. Those are things that over time, I think most people learn it. So you learn a lot about how to pull those off. I agree with you. I don't think I sit in the level of conversations that you do, but as I progress in my career, I find myself in those more, and I agree. They're not the most fun to go into, but they're so rewarding as you learn how to work through them better, as well as they lead to they're usually because there's high stakes, right? Like there's a lot of people, there's a lot of resources, something there is going on, and it's this like risk reward kind of, like it's worth stepping into those and learning those sort of skills.
And you said it right. You said high stakes. They're often high stakes. And you have to go into them realizing that you may not be successful in accomplishing your goals in every one of them. But sometimes it's those failures that really help you pick yourself up and go, okay, how come we didn't succeed here? What can I do to change my behavior? What can I do to change my approach? What different tools can I bring to the table next time that will help me be more successful? And that's what I think a good trainer does no matter what, is figuring out when something doesn't work, how do you adjust it, and what do you do differently next time to help it be successful the next time around?
Sound like there's some kind of, I don't know if this is the best word, but like coping strategies and like just strategies in general for when things don't go well that you were talking about there, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a big part of it is and that was I was at that, like I said, that event yesterday for a business. It was the likes of like Tony Robbins and those sort of folks that were there, right? And I think there's something to being able to take feedback or criticism or get knocked down and like get back up again in those situations.
If people go through their life assuming they'll be able to go through it without ever being criticized or without ever failing, they're going to be disappointed, because you are going to fail sometimes and you will face criticism sometimes. And sometimes surviving that, moving on from it, is about having the coping mechanisms and an understanding of why it occurs, so that it doesn't devastate you, but instead it emboldens you to pick up the pieces and move forward.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. I'm going to do one more call for questions. If anyone has anything for Ken, let me know, or myself. And Beverly, we got to her question. She said, thank you, by the way, Ken.
Thanks.
And is there any last thoughts, things that you kind of like to share with folks in general? Like you find yourself saying again and again, but you love saying it over and over again.
Well, I think for me, I will say that for me, my philosophy when it comes to training is to try to emphasize to people that training, when it comes to animal training, I think people often have a misconception about what it is. People think of training and they think of animals like performing tricks in a circus. And I always like to remind people that all that training is teaching. We are teaching animals how to live in our world. Whether it's a dog in our home or a lion in the zoo, we are trying to help that animal survive and thrive in our environment that we've created for them.
Mm-hmm.
And so teaching is a very natural process. And I always like to remind people that if you want to have an exceptionally good animal care program,
mm-hmm.
it has to include training. Just like you would never, ever have a pet in your home without having a veterinarian involved,
mm-hmm.
you really shouldn't have a pet in your home without having someone who understands training and behavior, because it's an integral part of their lives. And so I like to remind people that training should never be thought of as a luxury. It should never be thought of as something that you do if you have time.
Okay.
It should be thought of as integral to good animal care, just like nutrition, just like the environment, just like health care. Animal behavior and managing behavior is a key part to any animal having a successful life.
Yeah.
So I hope that people recognize that's what training is. It's about teaching and learning and helping to facilitate that for the animals in our lives.
I like that a lot. And also the comment section, Hannah said, training isn't a luxury. Yes, I love that. I haven't thought of it that way, but it's a nice, and it's also a quick, nice couple words that resonates really quickly.
Well, and it's important because you look at, just to quote a statistic, do you know that in the United States alone that over 9 million pets are euthanized every single year?
That's
and
insane.
Most of those are because people take a dog or a cat into their home, but don't think about the fact that they might need to train it. So when the dog pees in their house or chews their shoes, they never thought about the fact that behavior management was going to be important. If every single person who adopted a dog or a cat into their home thought about training and recognized that that was just as important as vet care and food and nutrition, you would have far less animals show up in shelters. But it's because people think of it as a luxury.
Yeah.
They don't recognize that it is something that you have to manage all the time. It's like being a parent and assuming that somehow you never have to think about your kids' behavior, that they will just naturally be well-behaved kids without any kind of guidance from you. Well, of course they won't. You have to teach them the rules and have to be there to mentor them and guide them. And you have to do the same thing with the animals in your life.
Yeah, that's those statistics put things into perspective, right? So the systems and training that you do, is it, I assume, an interest of trying to educate as much as you can to affect those sort of statistics at the end of the day? Help those people out?
I mean, that's been my motivation for being a teacher and a trainer, is to help animals all over the world have better lives. And as I have become passionate about training and seeing how it's helped animals in my life, the animals that I work with, I want to see other people be able to do that as well. And I find that use of good training skills enhances the quality of life of the animals around us. It helps them live longer lives. It helps them live happier, healthier lives. And so for me, that's a really valuable thing to be able to do. And because I have learned that skill set, I enjoy sharing it with others. And so a big part of what I do is teach other people how to train, teach other organizations how to implement those protocols into their programs, and help consult with areas where there are problems in various locations all over the world. And so for me, that's very rewarding, because I do want to see those numbers go down. And it's not just the pet world. I want to see the fact that animal habitats in the wild are rapidly disappearing, and animals are going extinct at a very alarming rate all over the world. And there's ways that my skill set, the things that I know how to do, can help alleviate some of those problems. But it requires working with wildlife biologists, it requires working with government legislatures, it requires working with people in different countries who have different cultures and have different interests. And so for me, it's a broad goal in my life to help animals wherever I can, in whatever way I can, by using my knowledge of behavior to try to improve those animals' lives.
Sounds like we need to get a bunch of ambassadors after the Seattle event to go out there and keep spreading it out, right?
That's right.
Yeah, that's a great mission. The exact sort of stuff we're trying to highlight when it comes to these conferences, and like what a science of behavior or any sort of approach should be aiming to achieve. So I love that. It's a hell of a lofty goal too. It's a lot of
it is.
A lot of change.
Anybody can do by themselves.
Exactly.
A village. It requires a worldwide movement, and that's why I work for organizations like Here in Fire Clicker Training, where our goal is to help people train better. And my goal has always been to really try to find ways of encouraging better training and helping people learn their skills and practice their skills so they become better and help the animals that they interact with every day.
Yeah. All right. I think that's a great place to kind of end, actually, if you're cool with that. Okay. I'm going to do a quick chat with the Facebook folks, and then we'll end that, but I'll hop over and I'll still talk with you afterwards. Just a quick wrap up.
Thank you.
Celeste just jumped in, said hello, everyone. Hey, Celeste. So we got 15 people here. Thank you so much. Anyone who's tuning in, watching, if you can do a quick share, like, whatever you're comfortable with, that like helps us get far outside of our network, especially if you're an animal trainer. I think this would be great content for them, right? If you don't want to, that's cool too. Jones did drop some links in. If there's any other questions, keep them coming. We can just, this is actually going to be embedded, stay up on our website. It's on Facebook forever, so we can keep these sort of questions and resource sharing going. If you do anything in this area, share your links down below too. We're interested in just kind of keeping the conversation going. John, thank you. If you have any specific praise, write it in real quick. I will let Ken know before we hop off the phone what those are. And yeah, I don't know. You betcha. Thanks, Hannah. Ken, I just want to do a quick say thank you so much for your time really quick.
My pleasure.
Connecting, and we jump back and forth. We were both time zone hopping a little bit. Made it work. I love when we can do those sort of things. I know the Karen Pryor clicker training at the ranch component was something we threw up part of this event, and it sold out like immediately. That's all filled up. I will be seeing you there. I have an idea to pitch to you after this, actually, really quick. Fun one while we're there. And yeah, I think that's it. So thanks for everyone's time. Smash the share button if you're into that sort of thing. It helps us out a ton here. If not, tag a friend, like, whatever. Thank you so much. I'm going to sign off the live, and we'll kind of keep those sort of things going. You want to say any last words? Goodbye.
No, I just thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me, and those that are watching or listening in, I really appreciate you being here as well. So take care, and thanks so much.
Cool. All right. Thanks all. I'm going to end this right now, and I'll see you in the comments section.